normal. Travel and lifestyle changes in the days of COVID. Sadly, for all of us who love to travel the world, the COVID pandemic has changed our peripatetic lifestyle in many different ways. Those of us with a severe case of wanderlust dislike even the smallest interruption of our travel plans. I find myself looking back and longing for the good old days of travel. The truth is that line of thinking has got to be a thing of the past because it provides a great amount of frustration. But when will unrestricted travel return? That is such a good question, but it has no answer. Change has become a reality during this pandemic. Changes in our lives became inevitable. We learned to cope with whole new ways of life with masks and disinfectants. Then there was the feeling of isolation with many more hours at home, fewer visits with loved ones, limited get-togethers with friends, a severely limited ability to travel internationally, just to mention a few. So often there were feelings of frustration as we began wondering when this COVID nightmare would come to an end. How about the new normal? Intrusions into our lives are ongoing. What about the airlines, as well as the other places still requiring face coverings? No longer is it possible for restaurant goers to hold a physical menu in their hands. QR codes are the norm these days. Then there is that intimidating handheld gun placed on your forehead to shoot to see if you have a temperature and to make sure you're safe to enter. Or how about requirements to present digital vaccine passports? Certain items became very hot sellers. Then there are the everyday added tasks, which we do routinely now by wiping down surfaces with disinfectants. This has become a routine task on planes, at home, everywhere. Here's another one. A good bet is online telemedicine is becoming a more popular choice instead of in-office doctor's visits. Another big shift is more and more people are working from home with no plans to return to an office environment. Sounds like a good time to launch an online business to me. Then there comes the subject of shortages, which have come one right after the other. At first it was toilet paper, but shortages appear to be ongoing. In the news are reliable reports warning consumers to expect shortages this Christmas season. Oh dear. And if all the above were not enough, get this, robots have been spotted in certain airports. Singapore comes to mind. Travelers not keeping social distancing in for a reprimand from one of these roving robots. Keep your acceptable distance, they say. Ever since the first moment COVID-19 intruded into our lives, coping with change became a reality. Most of us are not particularly fond of dealing with change, but this was a must during each stage of the pandemic. We had to find ways to adapt to new regulations and also the uncertainty of it all. Getting frustrated would do no good whatsoever for our sense of well-being. Being smart about our choices became a reality to protect ourselves each and every day. Roughly 1/4 of the responses provided in a Pew report, which lays out the impact of the pandemic. Unfortunately, most of the responses were negative. People didn't like the ways in which our government political culture, or society in general had seemingly degraded the course of the pandemic. Yep, they sure did. And the lackluster response to the spread of the disease, while others were baffled over financially ruinous lockdowns in response to what they view as an overhyped danger. Some expressed annoyance over mask-wearing requirements that they viewed as infringing on personal freedom. Others were dismayed that their fellow Americans refused to respect their safety by wearing a mask in public. Some queried in this survey remarked they noticed more kindness on the part of strangers. But these responses were rare. From Medical News Today online came the news this past Thursday, November 18th, 2021, the Czech and Slovak officials introduced new restrictions that predominantly affect unvaccinated individuals. A person can no longer access venues, including hotels, bars, museums, restaurants, and hairdressers by showing a negative coronavirus test. Access will only be granted for those individuals who have recovered from COVID-19 or have received a vaccine. Wow, that's pretty drastic. The worst part is every day we looked for positive improvements. But according to a recent survey, only a small number of Americans, 14%, feel that their mental and physical health has improved during the pandemic. A relatively small share of Americans, 14%, mentioned their own physical or mental health or that of people they know as being improved during the pandemic. In this long-suffering period of adapting to the new normal, it has been remarkably easy to become frustrated. The hardest part for me by far was the feeling of ongoing uncertainty. Travel decisions were completely out of my hands and out of my control. No longer was it possible to make decisions about where to go whenever I wanted to go somewhere, anytime, anywhere. Hopping on a plane at a moment's notice was out of the question. The enjoyment of planning a trip and then taking it was no longer a current option. Talk about a definition of frustration. That was it. Because I am not one to dwell on the negative, it became so important to find a new way to cope with these changes. For starters, my husband and I began taking trips around our state to small towns for their charm and their history. This proved to be a very good antidote for our no traveling blues. What joy we felt in being in so many interesting places we had never been before, learning the local history, enjoying a town's popular restaurant, visiting a museum if there was one. It was all just fabulous. Local travel turned a negative situation into a positive one. That's the key. Sometimes it's difficult to find that key, but continue to search. You will eventually open new doors. This Thanksgiving, after 2 years of social distancing, people are returning to family gatherings again. And that's a very good thing. I found this part of the survey hard to believe, but that might just be me. Among other findings, the survey showed that up to a half Americans plan to inquire about the potential vaccination status of their guests. Can you believe that? As the days go on, slowly but surely, more and more restrictions will be lifted. The frustrating part that one knows so well and how much longer it will last. What will it take to end this period of time in the history of pandemic diseases? but certainly there are permanent changes that will be made. But in the meantime, this gal is grateful because the worst is behind us. It's onward and upward from this point forward. A post-pandemic life will be here in the near future, and that will be time for a celebration. There is not a single soul who has not been untouched after this COVID, with all the COVID rules and regulations which have altered and hindered and obstructed the traveling experience. Sometimes it is exhausting trying to keep up with all the new normal, yet those of us who love to travel, will not be deterred, because you know why? The destination becomes the prime focus, not the hassle getting there.